This video sponsor, Surfshark VPN, offers an all-in-one tool to help strengthen your online privacy and security. Get an extra 4 months when you sign up using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. More details after the video. Gamers, happy Subnautica 2 Day to those of you on PC at least. At the time of writing, the game launched just a few hours ago and has already peaked at over 467,000 concurrent players. It sold more than 1 million copies in like its first hour. Can you imagine being the Krafton CEO right now looking at those numbers? But his recent ChatGPT searches is stuff like how to fake your own death to claim the insurance. Claims that Subnautica 2 wasn't ready for its early access launch also appear to have been over-exaggerated, as the game currently sits at a very positive 91% with over 10,000 reviews counted. Admittedly, those people are very early in the game and that score may change, but 10,000 people giving it the thumbs up right out of the gate certainly isn't indicative of a product not ready for public consumption. Looks like those Subnautica co-founders are going to have a spare $250 million to play with sometime soon, and it looks like that Krafton CEO is going to be pursuing a new career as a prompt engineer. That's a job, right? I think I saw it on LinkedIn once. Anyway, that's the intro block out the way. Let's get to the rest of the news, shall we? All right, it's financial earnings season, which means companies are coming out of the woodwork to tell us how they've been going, what they're planning to do next year, and how much we're going to be paying for it. Let's come with some notable headlines, perhaps the biggest of which has to be Nintendo officially announcing a price hike for the Nintendo Switch 2. There have been hints that something like this would happen for a while now, given comments from Nintendo leadership in prior earnings calls, responding to things like tariffs and the memory and storage crisis, and we were all just waiting for the shoe to drop. Now, it finally has. Nintendo has advised that the cost of the Switch 2 will increase from $450 to $500 in the US, from 470 euros to 500 in Europe, and from 700 Australian dollars to 770. Those changes are actually scheduled for September 1st of this year, so still a decent amount of time to get in before those increases occur at least, which is a nice change of pace from Sony going surprise and then just jacking the price immediately. Those in Japan are a little pressed for time though, as the Japanese language only Switch 2 will be raised from 50,000 yen to 60,000 yen effective May 25th, less than 2 weeks away. In Japan, the cost of Nintendo Switch 1 models will also increase, raised to 48,000 yen for the OLED model, 44,000 yen for the standard model, and 30,000 yen for the light model. The cost of the Switch 1 in the US will not be affected, but that's partly to do with the fact that the US had already received a price hike back in August of last year, which also affected some Switch 2 accessories, amiibos, and its alarm clock, Alarmo. Remember that thing? No, you don't. That's not the end of the price bumps though. Separate to the hardware, Nintendo are also looking to increase the cost of its Nintendo Switch Online service, which also became more expensive. In Japan, 1 month will soon cost you 400 yen, almost a 25% increase over the current 306 yen, and this is similarly reflected in other available plans. Nintendo advised that it would, quote, adjust the balance of service prices across different regions, but has not announced the increase for other regions at the time of writing. Beware though, they are definitely coming. As for why this is happening, the company says the changes are, quote, in response to various changes in market conditions, which are expected to extend over the medium to long term, end quote. This is of course referring to the ongoing memory shortage issue that we are all unfortunately well acquainted with now. We'd already seen price hikes for both PlayStation and Xbox in response, and Nintendo was likely holding out just a little to get the Switch 2 install base up, but it was only a matter of time before Nintendo eventually joined them. Further, Nintendo goes on to say in their earnings report that in the next fiscal year, it expects to be impacted by this issue to the amount of 100 billion yen, which is about 637 million US dollars. So yeah, that's quite a hit to the bottom line. And so as much as this does suck for consumers, you can also understand how the present situation has more or less forced their hand, since all console manufacturers are in the unfortunate position of having to bid against the likes of Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta for vital memory and storage components. The AI bubble isn't set to burst anytime soon, by the way, so Nintendo are likely correct when they define this as a medium to long-term problem. Price has gone up, and sadly, it ain't coming down anytime soon. Sony, for their part, are grappling with this issue too. Following their FY25 financial report, the company's president and CEO Hiroki Totoki held a Q&A with media and investors where he was asked about the impact of memory costs on both present and future hardware. The good news is that Totoki says that the PlayStation 5 shouldn't incur any further price increases this year, affirming that for the rest of 2026, quote, the necessary volume of components has been secured, end quote, and then in regard to those components, Sony has, quote, to a certain extent agreed on the price, end quote. Okay. He then addressed what the memory shortage and rising costs could mean for the PlayStation 6, and like what's been said in the past, that all appears to be far less certain. Quote, we've not yet decided on at what time we will launch the new console or at what prices. So we would like to really observe and follow the situation. Looking at the current circumstances, the memory prices are expected to be very high for FY27 because there will still be a shortage of supply. So under that assumption, we would like to carefully think about what we will do. How can we reduce other costs of the hardware other than the semiconductor, and also we might think of new ways of selling the product. So we will do various simulations, including changing business models to come up with the best solution and strategy, end quote. You might remember a Bloomberg report from back in February claiming that Sony was considering pushing back the launch of its next-gen console due to the memory shortages, with sources claiming it could arrive as late as 2028 or 2029, and that appears to be even more credible given these recent comments. Sony clearly have a lot to work out here, so it's probably prudent for them to hang back a little bit until they can land on a proper solution. And to be honest, I'm also kind of happy for them to take their time because, like I've said before, I just don't think we really need a PS6 anytime soon. The graphical fidelity of today's games isn't really pushing to new heights that current-gen consoles can't handle, and that's especially true of the PS5 Pro, with its recent PSSR update delivering a tidy uplift in performance in the way it can maintain both high detail and smooth frame rates. I doubt there are many of you out there who feel like we've really gotten the most out of this current generation of hardware, and add to that, we're in the age where people are more comfortable with the idea that the fidelity on stuff like the Switch 2 and Steam Deck are good enough. The only reason that Sony would want to get a new console out the door, of course, is money, as Sony's recent financial results indicate that PS5 console sales are on a steady decline, with 1.5 million units sold during Q4 2025, almost half of the 2.8 million units sold during Q4 of the prior year. But that is to be expected as you get deeper into a console generation, and I don't think that should be the reason that they rush a $1,000 console out the door that nobody needs or can afford right now. Having said all of that, I imagine one reason they're looking to push out this new console ASAP is to make up for some disappointing results elsewhere. If you've been on Twitter lately, you probably already know where I'm going with this. Sony's full fiscal year results for its game division saw operating income increase to 463 billion yen, or roughly $2.9 billion US, an increase of 11.6%, which was, quote, a record high for the segment, end quote. So yeah, not bad, but what is interesting is that Sony claims that that would have been a 45% increase had it not been for the massive impairment loss they have taken on related to the acquisition of one Bungie studio. Sony CFO Lin Tao said, quote, "In our studio business, earnings from Bungie's title portfolio did not reach our expectations, so we downwardly revised our business plan and impaired the full amount of the fixed asset related to Bungie except for goodwill," end quote. In layman's terms, this doesn't mean they lost money in the traditional sense, just that they're adjusting the value of the Bungie asset down from the $3.6 billion US they paid for it all those years ago. How much have they devalued it, you ask? Try 120 billion yen, or roughly $766 million US, a figure that includes a new 88.6 billion yen impairment loss, in addition to the 31.5 billion loss reported in November 2025. So yeah, a pretty massive write-down. It's no secret that Bungie has been struggling for quite some time now. You've heard me cover it on this show regularly, but as a little reminder, the last Destiny 2 expansion, Renegades, peaked at around 71,000 players, 26% lower than the previous expansion, Edge of Fate, which itself peaked at less than a third of the final shape before it. Marathon, meanwhile, has seen its player count cut in half within the last month, as rusted-on players are fat with loot at this point, and that combined with an approaching seasonal reset that'll wipe everyone's gear, means that jumping in right now isn't particularly worthwhile to either veterans or newcomers. Despite these losses though, Tao suggests there are no plans to shut down Marathon, saying, quote, "Player reception to Marathon is strong, with the game receiving a Metacritic score of 82 and more than 90% of the player reviews on Steam being positive. Engagement metrics such as retention also remain at a high level. Going forward, we aim to improve the performance of the game by working to retain highly engaged core users through the introduction of additional content, further improvements in gameplay experience, and expansion of the user base," end quote. So if we take that at face value, it seems like Marathon players don't have to worry about the game shutting down anytime soon, and that's obviously a good thing. Even if you don't click with what Marathon is doing, it's pretty clear that it's a well-crafted extraction shooter that should continue to be supported for its devoted player base. But when its 24-hour player count is already hovering beneath that of Destiny 2, which itself is struggling more than it ever has, I just don't see how anyone could look at that and believe that PlayStation are going to happily eat their losses long into the future. Each recent Destiny expansion has performed worse than the last, which means both less box sales and less in-game spending sales. And there's no way that Marathon's extremely limited cash shop offerings are raking in huge amounts of cash right now. So while PlayStation is seeing record profits, that $3.6 billion Bungie acquisition is a weight that will surely continue to drag them down, and who knows how long they'll be willing to tolerate that before they make some serious cuts. And if those cuts aren't made at Bungie, then they'll surely be made somewhere else. A quick lightning round now, and there were hints from Xbox some time ago that they were teaming up with Discord for something. Well, now we know what that something is, because this week Discord announced that the previously leaked Starter Edition of Xbox Game Pass is being rolled into the standard $10 per month Discord Nitro subscription. This version of Game Pass gives you access to over 50 games, including titles like Fallout 4, Stardew Valley, DayZ, Deep Rock Galactic, Overcooked 2, and Grounded, according to a Discord post, as well as 10 months of cloud gaming and access to Xbox Xbox rewards. Alongside this announcement, Discord also revealed more new benefits for Discord Nitro members, such as discounts at select gaming hardware retailers such as Logitech, SteelSeries, and Control Freak. TLDR, if you are a Discord Nitro subscriber, you just got a bunch of free games added to your pile of shame. Enjoy. Stellar Blade sequel will be self-published according to developer ShiftUp. In a new earnings report, ShiftUp says that development on the sequel to Stellar Blade is progressing well, and they're, quote, formulating an optimal go-to-market strategy designed to maximize sales and reach a broad global audience from day one, end quote. So what does that mean? Well, since it won't be published by PlayStation and rather by ShiftUp themselves, they're probably going to go big on day one and make sure it's on PC as well as PlayStation, and maybe even Xbox too, depending on whether they've grown their user base by then. This appears to be somewhat of an emerging trend, as it echoes the decision made by Arrowhead Studios, the developers of Helldivers, when they confirmed this time last year that they would not be partnering with Sony for their next game, so they could have complete and total creative control. Good luck to them, I say. Crimson Desert and Black Desert Online developer Pearl Abyss has sold CCP Games, a subsidiary studio known for their spacefaring MMO EVE Online, back to its CEO. It was sold for approximately US $120 million, which actually comes at a loss for Pearl Abyss since they acquired CCP Games back in 2018 for roughly $425 million US all up. As for what this means for EVE Online and the studio, a Pearl Abyss spokesperson notes, quote, this transaction is limited to a change in ownership and governance structure, and there will be no change to CCP's organization, products, development plans, and direction, end quote. So that's reassuring to hear. CCP Games has, however, renamed the company Fenris Creations following its independence to avoid confusion with the Chinese government, fair enough, and also announced a research partnership with Google DeepMind that'll apparently use EVE Online as a testbed for complex AI learning in a weird and uncomfortable way. That partnership makes total sense. Don't ask me why. Sega has reportedly cancelled their Super Game project, according to a recent financial report. If you're wondering what this is, it was initially thought to be a single large-scale game, but Sega's then executive vice president Shuji Utsumi later clarified that the company, quote, defined Super Game as the development of AAA titles that cross over Sega's comprehensive range of technologies, end quote, basically hinting at AAA revivals of some of their IP, but those will no longer come to fruition. However, the remakes of legacy IPs such as Jet Set Radio, Golden Axe, and Crazy Taxi are still going ahead, so that's somewhat of a relief because there's only so many Sonic remasters we can handle. In conjunction with the cancellation, Sega also stated that it would be lowering the priority of free-to-play games moving forward, with 100 free-to-play developers at the company having, quote, already been transferred to full game development teams focusing on the mainstay IPs, end quote. Sad day for the 7 of you out there hoping for Sonic Rebel 2. The upcoming Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic is surely a massively expensive project to develop, so you might be wondering where the hell this new studio is getting the money to fund it. Part of that answer came this week as Bloomberg reports that ex-NetEase executive Simon Zhu has spun up his own holding company known as Greater Than Group, and this company will invest in studios around the world, one of which is indeed Fate of the Old Republic developer Archanaut Studios, held by Mass Effect co-creator Casey Hudson. It's notable because this is actually Hudson's second new studio since leaving BioWare back in 2020. The first was Humanoid Origin, which was working on a new sci-fi RPG, but that was shut down in November last year, citing a lack of funding. Interestingly, Bloomberg's coverage of this recent announcement says that NetEase was actually one of the main investors in Humanoid Origin. Similarly, Greater Than Group also announced it's investing in Bullet Farm, a studio formed by former Call of Duty Black Ops series developer David Vonderhaar, and like Humanoid Origin, that was initially a partnership with NetEase, so perhaps Zhu hopes this new outfit can push projects over the line in a way that NetEase simply did not want to. He tells Bloomberg, quote, it's not about commercial success alone, it's about making a good case that we can make good money and provide good entertainment to people in a decent and honest way, end quote. Sounds pretty good to me. Hey, remember last week when GameStop offered to acquire eBay? Well, shocker, eBay declined. It's not surprising because GameStop CEO Ryan Cohen's proposal was shaky at best. GameStop's $11.5 billion market cap falls far below that of eBay's $50.5 billion, yet Cohen was proposing a $55 billion buyout, which he was hoping to finance with half cash, half stock. The details are on the website. Anyway, eBay wasn't biting. In an open letter to Cohen, eBay's chairman of the board of directors, Paul S. Pressler, said the board, quote, thoroughly reviewed your proposal and is determined to reject it. We have concluded that your proposal is neither credible nor attractive. eBay's board is confident that the company under its current management team is well positioned to continue to drive sustainable growth, execute with discipline, and deliver long-term value for our shareholders, end quote. In other words, the seller has rejected your offer. Please feel free to submit another or contact eBay customer support for help. Aftermath reports that Tim Schafer's studio Double Fine Productions has recently filed a petition to unionize. Double Fine filed the petition with the National Labor Relations Board on May 7th, set to form the union with the Communication Workers of America, and it will reportedly include all, quote, regular part-time and full-time employees, end quote. This adds to the growing list of Microsoft studios doing the very same thing. In February of this year, QA workers at Blizzard ratified a union contract with Microsoft, and last year, over 550 Blizzard developers across the Hearthstone, Warcraft Rumble, and Diablo teams formed separate unions. Call of Duty developer Raven Software also submitted their first union contract with Microsoft in August of last year, as did QA workers at ZeniMax months prior to that. And yeah, given the tons of people Microsoft have laid off in recent years, it certainly makes sense that studios such as these would look to protect themselves. I'm sure we'll see many more studios join them in the future. Speaking of layoff fears, what the hell is going on over at Nagoshi Studio? Ever since the reveal of their debut title Gang of Dragon at the Game Awards last year, we haven't heard or seen anything about it until a Bloomberg report back in March said that NetEase had pulled funding from the studio as of May, and that's this month. In the time since, the YouTube channel was randomly taken offline, then put back online again, causing momentary panic that the game was indeed dead. But now those fears feel much more warranted as the game's website has now gone offline. But that was like days ago and it's still not back up. So yeah, I don't want to assume this means the studio has been completely shut down now, but it certainly isn't looking good. And yeah, it would really suck to see that happen because more than a few people were really looking forward to this one. Like a grittier, less stylized Yakuza with Ma Dong-seok as the lead. A game made by one of the original creators of the Yakuza series. That sounds pretty damn good. But yeah, as I said, not too confident it'll ever see the light of day now, sadly. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. Finally, the Strong National Museum of Play has announced the 2026 inductees for its Video Game Hall of Fame. This annual intake looks to acknowledge titles that have had a significant influence on global culture, and so this year's inductees include Dragon Quest, Silent Hill, FIFA, and Angry Birds. I will say they won out over some fierce competition, as this year's nomination pool included the likes of Skyrim, League of Legends, Frogger, Mega Man, and Parrap the Rapper. I feel like one or more of those games got pretty robbed, to be honest. Parrapper the Rapper is always next year, buddy. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, honestly, not a whole lot. We're definitely getting into that period where Summer Games Fest is looming over the horizon, and about 50 different showcases are going to blast us with more trailers than we can ever watch in a single year. So this week is a little light, to say the least. Still, we did get some notable things. Alien Fireteam's Elite 2 was announced. This is a sequel to the third-person co-op shooter that was released around 5 years ago now from Cold Iron Studios, and was quite well received, actually. I quite like this one. Northern Hemisphere summer for this one, so not too long to wait now. PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. Pro Team and Devolver Digital also announced the Talos Principle 3, the third and final game in their first-person puzzle game series with the absolute most graphics. This series really scratches your brain, so do give it a try if you haven't. It's slated for 2027 for PC and PS5. We also got a release date for Mina the Hollower, the long-awaited game from Shovel Knight developers Yacht Club. This one has had a few delays, but it's now slated for May 29th on absolutely all platforms. Hopefully this one pays off for them, because that studio has certainly been going through it these past few years, and they really need this one to land big. Another game with retro vibes, Dark Scrolls, is also coming out. It's May 28th for PC and Switch only. This is the next game from Gunbrella developer Doinksoft and published by Devolver Digital, kind of like a retro side-scrolling shoot-'em-up with some roguelike elements. Finally, we also get a release window for Stranger Than Heaven, the next game from the Yakuza devs that also stars Snoop Dogg and his son for whatever reason. It's slated for Northern Hemisphere winter, so either at the end of the year or more likely early next year if the studio's historical release cadence is anything to go by. So what came out last week? Well, let's kick things off on a high note with the early access release of Alabaster Dawn. This is the next retro action RPG from the folks who made a very well-received game called Crosscode a while back, and it seems like they're nailing this one so far too. It sits at overwhelmingly positive on Steam with over 1,000 reviews counted, 90% of those giving it the thumbs up, with most of the complaints being that it's relatively short, being just the first 10 hours or so of the eventual full game. Here's Steam user Wages of War, who gave it a thumbs up, saying, quote, "Gameplay with skill expression, with parries and timed attacks is always welcome in a game where you are constantly fighting things. It just makes everything feel better. Fluidity of everything is at its peak, and every button and animation seamlessly flows into another. Support this amazing team, they deserve it," end quote. Moving on to the game that everyone loves talking about on Twitter and in the comments section, Mixtape. So, true story, my review for this game and the podcast that went up were two of the most disliked videos in the history of my entire channel. All week, I've been dealing with Twitter dunks and polite requests for me to kill myself, all because I happen to enjoy a cute little music game and because I recommended it while also pointing out some problems I had with its narrative and while also making clear the limitations this game faces when it comes to playability. Now listen, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the Mixtape discourse because frankly, I just don't want to do that. All I will say is that I saw a part of the discourse being like, hey man, why did you even upload this shit? If you knew it was going to make people mad, why would you upload this video? And the simple answer to that is that if I wasn't willing to upload a take that I knew people would disagree with, I would be a pretty fucking shitty critic and I would have zero credibility. Sometimes I'm gonna hate the thing you love or love the thing you hate, but whether you agree with me or disagree with me, you are always going to know that what I'm saying is what I believe. Full stop, and it is 1000% the case with Mixtape, a game that I liked and I recommend. And I'm not the only one, because while you've no doubt heard that many critics are on board with it, Steam reviews are also firmly on board with the game, sitting at 90% very positive with over 4,000 reviews counted. And I think that number really matters in this specific context when online discourse can seem like reality, when in actual reality, 9 out of 10 people who have purchased and played Mixtape recommend it. But just like I said in my review, it's not for everyone. And while Mixtape debuted as the highest rated game of the year, reviews rolling in after that have generally been a little more critical, dropping the OpenCritic score to an 87. PC Gamer offered one of the more critical reviews, focusing on the lack of interactivity that Mixtape offers. Scoring it a 74, they said, quote, "Lovely, beautiful, heartwarming, and unable to convince me it needed my input as a player at all," end quote. And that is a very fair assessment of Mixtape, I think. So, that is Mixtape, and that is all I will say about it for now, though I am sure we can look forward to round 2 of this discourse when the Game Awards roll around. As the Japanese say, please look forward to it. From coming-of-age narratives to horror narratives now, and Directive 8020 also landed this week, this being the latest from Until Dawn and the Quarry developers Supermassive, who have essentially owned this genre for quite a long time now. Unlike Mixtape, reviewers were very mixed on this one, with a lot of varying scores, resulting in a strong 76 on OpenCritic. Here's Eurogamer, who landed at a 3 out of 5, saying, quote, "I genuinely admire Supermassive's drive to do something a bit different with its anthology series, and the introduction of new play styles and a more sophisticated, cerebral tone is refreshing too. Although I'm not sure this will be as much of a co-op crowd pleaser as its predecessors, shorn of those popcorn thrills. In some ways, Directive 8020 feels like a game of missed opportunities and a bunch of almost theirs. But sometimes Supermassive's ambition pays off. It's a touch too long, it's a little too one note, and I wish it could have pushed a little harder to find its own identity as it charted so much well-trodden ground. But its existential chills are effective, it's got an earnest spirit, and a phenomenal cast that genuinely made me care," end quote. Finally, another horror-adjacent game that came out was Call of the Elder Gods, the puzzle adventure game from the folks behind Call of the Sea and American Arcadia. This one's landed at a strong 80 on OpenCritic. Here's IGN, who gave it an 8 out of 10, saying, quote, "Call of the Elder Gods wonderfully captures an otherworldly tone and the sense of mystery of its predecessor, which remains a hidden gem of this decade. While its ambitions chip away at feeling as captivating, it's an especially touching sequel to further explore the events of Call of the Sea, while still having some rewarding Myst-style puzzle solving to complement a new story that's about finding a sense of closure. Developer Out of the Blue Games' follow-up nails the emotional core of its first-person adventure effort, all while giving its characters and puzzle design time to shine," end quote. Alright, so what's coming out this week? Well, things are starting to heat up this week with at least 3 big titles to look out for, arranged on a bed of nice niche indies as well, one of which kicks off on the week of Monday, 18th of May. That one's Thrifty Business, a shop management game for millennials where you look after a thrift shop in the 90s. It's got a really bright pink and purple art style and takes some inspiration from games like Unpacking and its style of item placement and decorating too. Looks nice, and I'm sure if you like wholesome games, you've probably already slammed the wishlist button on this one. This game comes from the indie studio who made a game called Sticky Business a few years ago, a management game where you made custom stickers and then sold them. That game smashed it on Steam with an overwhelmingly positive rating and over 7,000 reviews counted, so they clearly know what they're doing. PC only for this one. Moving on to Tuesday, May 19th, that's the day that Forza Horizon 6 officially drops, but they are doing that paid early access nonsense, which means if you pony up for the premium edition, you can get early access beginning on Friday, May 15th. Horizon 6 finally takes the series to Japan, a much requested location. Reviews for this one are actually out already on account of the whole early access thing, so we'll revisit those next week, and my review is on the way as well, but as usual, I don't want to be coy about it. I absolutely love this. I'm a little disappointed that there isn't a lot of new stuff to really move the format forward, but the core racing is as fantastic as ever, and Japan is stunning to both look at and drive through, since the intricacy of its layouts provides so many different racing experiences. More detail to come in my full review, but don't be afraid to jump into this one when it launches on the 19th, and don't forget, it's also on Game Pass Ultimate if you're into that. Moving right along to Wednesday, May 20th, and we've got a few PC titles sneaking in before the big Thursday, starting off with a game called Spacecraft. No, this isn't a we have StarCraft at home situation, but rather an exploring, crafting, automation, and spacefaring game, kind of like what if No Man's Sky was made by Funcom or something. It comes from Shiro Games, who made that June Spice Wars RTS, as well as an open world RPG called War Tales, and this one releases into early access for PC only, of course. For something a little less involved and easier on the eyes, Phonopolis is also releasing that same day. This one featured on our radar segment a few months ago. It's a new puzzle adventure game from Czech outfit Amanita Design, who are very good at making these types of games. The big hook here is that the entire world has been handmade in real life with real cardboard before being scanned into the game, so it looks absolutely lovely. It's a game about toppling a fascist regime. Check it out. Get it? Check, like Czech Republic. Anyway, the last one on our radar for Wednesday is Thick as Thieves, a stealth action and heist game from Other Side Entertainment, which boasts the talents of Warren Spector, one of the key figures behind the immersive sim genre, and games like Ultima Underworld, Deus Ex, and of course, Epic Mickey. This legend is 70 years old now, but he's still at it. One interesting thing about this game is that it started off as a PvP game where you were competing against other thieves, but has since shifted to a solo or co-op game. Curious to see how it turns out, but they have flagged that this is a relatively short experience and have priced it to match. We'll check back in on the reviews next week. Moving on to Thursday, May 21st now, and kicking us off here is Zero Parades for Dead Spies, the new RPG from Zaum, the studio behind Disco Elysium, even if many of the people who worked on Disco Elysium are no longer at that studio. There's been a lot of talk over the last few years about just how much creative talent that worked on Disco is still at Zaum. But what we do know is that based on the Zero Parades demo that was out, it seems like this one has a fair amount of source on its own merits, and so we're cautiously optimistic that this one delivers. PC only for this one for now. Following that one are three very different games. The first is Gallipoli, a first-person shooter based on World War I, specifically the Middle Eastern theater, which holds quite a lot of significance to Australians. Developer Black Mill have made pretty acclaimed World War I FPS games in the past, like Verdun and Isonzo. This one feels like one of those dad games, but then again, maybe that's you now. There's only so many years I can keep saying that before we all look around and realize that we just bought a steering wheel to maximize our immersion while playing Euro Truck Simulator. That day will surely come, but it is not this day, thankfully. If the horrors of war aren't quite for you, then this next one will sit a little better. Thursday also brings Coffee Talk Tokyo, the latest installment in the Coffee Talk visual novel series that sees you run a coffee store in a modern fantasy world, make your patrons drinks, listen to their stories, and learn more about the world. The first two games in this series are definitely favorites among the visual novel crowd, so there's very high expectations for this one. It's headed to all platforms. We mentioned puzzle game Schrodinger's Cat Burglar last week in our radar segment, but another heads up that this comes out on Thursday, 21st of May for PC. But this cat isn't the only animal getting a release that day. No, there's also this dinosaur frog thing called Yoshi. That's right, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book drops next Thursday, but it's not your typical platforming game. The premise for this one is a giant magical book called Mr. E. Get it? Like mystery? Yeah, anyway. Yoshi's diving into the book to discover more about the creatures it documents. Levels involve interacting with new creatures, gradually finding out about their powers or properties, and using said properties to explore the level and solve puzzles. Interesting premise, and it's got a rough, sketchy art and animation style to suit. Switch 2 only for this one. All right, for something a little more niche and hardcore, but perhaps not in the way you're expecting, we're going to put this on your radar. This is a game called 868 Back, and it's a hacking-themed roguelike in the most traditional sense of the term. A turn-based permadeath dungeon crawler. You infiltrate sewers, steal data, use abstract hacking abilities to destroy personified viruses and other nasties, and take down corporations. At least we think that's what's going on. This is the latest from a New Zealand developer called Michael Bruff, whose entire body of work has been focused on exploring roguelike mechanics in these really focused games that take place in constrained, procedurally generated grid-like spaces. Because they're turn-based, and since the play area is so small, every move you make has huge risk and reward possibilities, and every ability you spend resources to cast can be a game changer. This guy is fascinating, by the way. Some of the roguelikes he's made in the past have mechanics like assigning attacks to floor tiles, having your abilities be procedurally generated as you cast them, and even just be in an entirely foreign language so you need to experiment with them. Also, I think he lives in the forest. Anyway, 868 Back is a bit of a comeback for him after a long break, a sequel to one of his earlier games, and it's being published by Tunic and Night in the Woods publisher Finji. If you like strategy and tactics games with heavy mental loads, you can follow a link to this one over on our Steam curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Our feel-good story of the week involves one of my favorite hobbies, spotting Wilhelm screams. So this month, Valve released the Steam controller. Great kit, definitely recommend it if you're interested in a quality PC-first controller. My review below the like button. But it appears as though my testing wasn't as comprehensive as it should have been, because just this week, Reddit user RF3D19 discovered that if you drop your Steam controller while using Steam's Big Picture mode, the controller will sometimes react. That sound is, of course, the legendary Wilhelm scream that filmmakers love to drop in as a bit of a cheeky cinematic Easter egg, so it's only fitting that Valve make it an Easter egg of their own. What's particularly crazy, though, is that the Steam controller doesn't have a speaker in it. So you might be wondering, how is it making that sound? The answer is the haptic motors. They can be fired in ways that produce all manner of sounds, including, apparently, a surprisingly accurate Wilhelm scream. With the way that Valve approach open sourcing their tools, I'm pretty sure we're going to see many more sound effects added to the Steam controller over time. so I suspect this won't be the last time we highlight this particular feature in this segment. Okay, ladies and gents, that is the show for the week, done and dusted. Did you enjoy yourself? If you did, we'd love it if you could give us a big old thumbs up, because after Mixtape, that like button is feeling a little ignored, a little lonely. So cheer him up by giving him a press and maybe even consider subscribing if you're new around here, because we'd love to have you back. I'm off to finish my Forza review, plus we have some exciting stuff coming up next week that I can't talk about just yet, but you are going to like it, trust me on that. For now though, a big thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. To make sure my online presence is as secure as possible, I use this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark ensures my data is encrypted, making my online activity much harder to track and giving me the freedom to browse the web freely by changing my virtual location and IP address. We recently passed laws in Australia that restrict a plethora of websites and social media platforms, many receiving bans that make them basically inaccessible. One major criticism of this new law is that it would leave more room for mass data breaches, which have become more rampant around the world in recent years, allowing hackers easy access to large quantities of personal data. Using Surfshark VPN means I can watch all the shows and visit any sites that are currently restricted by geo-blocking in Australia, while having the peace of mind that my data is much more protected by Surfshark's all-in-one online safety tools. Surfshark's data protection extends further than just geo-blocking though. Email phishing scams are one of the most common ways bad faith actors can gain access to your data, but Surfshark has a solution in its email scam checker that helps protect against phishing attacks. Public Wi-Fi is another major hub for data theft, but Surfshark has you covered by hiding your IP address, making all of your activity private. It's super convenient since Surfshark can be used on a range of devices from PCs to phones to tablets and more, and their intuitive user interface makes it so easy to use. Sometimes it's as little as one click and you're away. I love it. I would never not have it installed on all my devices. And if you want to check it out for yourself, you can visit surfshark.com/skillup. And if you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout, you'll get an extra 4 months when you sign up. A great deal for a great product. That's surfshark.com/skillup. Offer code SKILLUP at checkout for an extra 4 months. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.